The dying Empress lay motionless on the crystalline medical platform, her silver skin dulled to the color of ash. Tubes and wires snaked across her body like metallic parasites, feeding her nutrients that her failing organs could no longer process. The royal physicians of the Zephyrian Empire stood around her in defeated silence, their multiple eyes reflecting the harsh medical lights above. "How much longer?" asked General Vexitar, his voice barely above a whisper. His normally proud military bearing had crumbled over the past weeks as he watched his beloved ruler fade away. "Hours, perhaps less," replied Chief Physician Mordan, his forearms hanging limply at his sides. "The poison has spread to every major organ system. Even our most advanced regeneration chambers cannot reverse the damage." The assassins chose their weapon well. The Empress stirred slightly, her breathing shallow and labored. At only 200 years old, she was barely past adolescence by Zephyrian standards, yet she had already proven herself one of the greatest leaders in their species' history. Under her rule, the Empire had expanded across 12 star systems, bringing peace and prosperity to countless worlds. Now, all of that progress hung in the balance. Emperor Zaltek, her father and predecessor, had been murdered by the same terrorist organization just 6 months earlier. The group called themselves the Liberation Front, claiming they fought against imperial oppression. In reality, they were funded by rival species who feared the growing influence of the Zephyrian Empire. The poison they had used was a masterpiece of biological warfare, specifically designed to target Zephyrian physiology, while remaining undetectable until it was too late. "My lord," a communications officer rushed into the medical bay, his scales flushed with urgency. "We're receiving a transmission from the outer perimeter. It's unusual." General Vextar turned, grateful for any distraction from the grim scene before him. "What kind of unusual?" "A human vessel, sir. Single occupant. They're requesting permission to dock, claiming they have medical expertise that might help." A collective hiss arose from the assembled physicians. Humans were known throughout the galaxy as violent primitives, barely capable of interstellar travel. Their medical knowledge was considered laughably primitive by most civilized species. The idea that a human could succeed where the Empire's finest doctors had failed was absurd. "Turn them away," Mordan said dismissively. "We have no time for primitive superstitions." But General Vextar hesitated. He had fought alongside humans during the Krillian border wars 3 years ago. What they lacked in technology, they more than made up for in determination and creativity. He had seen human medics work miracles with nothing more than basic supplies and stubborn refusal to accept defeat. "What does this human claim to offer?" he asked. The communications officer checked his datapad. "They say they've encountered this type of poison before. Something about compatibility protocols and blood transfusion. The concept was so primitive that most galactic species had abandoned it millennia ago in favor of cellular regeneration and synthetic plasma. Yet something in the human's confidence gave Vextar pause. "Sir," Morden protested, "surely you cannot be considering this. Human blood is completely incompatible with Zephyrian physiology. It would kill her faster than the poison." "She's already dying," Vextar replied quietly. "And I've learned never to underestimate human stubbornness." He turned to the communications officer. "Grant them docking permission. Escort them here under heavy guard." 20 minutes later, the medical bay doors hissed open to admit the human. He was tall by human standards, perhaps 6 feet, with the lean build of someone accustomed to hard work. His face bore the weathered look of a veteran, with scars crossing his left cheek and temple. His dark hair was streaked with premature gray, and his brown eyes held the steady gaze of someone who had seen too much death. "Captain Marcus Chen, Independent Medical Corps," he said, offering a slight bow to the assembled Zephyrians. His voice carried a slight accent that suggested origins in the Terra-Asian sectors. "I came as soon as I heard about the Empress." "You're wasting our time, human," Morden spat. "Your primitive medicine cannot help her." Marcus ignored the insult and approached the medical platform, his eyes scanning the various monitors and readouts. Despite the advanced alien technology, he seemed to understand the basic vital signs displayed. "Neurotoxic compound, probably synthetic," he murmured, more to himself than to the others. "Designed to target specific genetic markers. I've seen this before on Kepler Prime." "Impossible," another physician interjected. "This poison was created specifically for our physiology. No other species has ever encountered it." Marcus pulled out a small device that looked almost primitive compared to the Zephyrian medical equipment. That's what they told the Altarians too, right before their entire royal family died. The Liberation Front has been very busy. He looked up at the assembled doctors. This isn't the first time they've tried this exact approach. A chill ran through the room. The Altarian royal massacre had shocked the galaxy 6 months ago, but no one had connected it to the Zephyrian attacks. If the human was right, then this was part of a much larger conspiracy. Even if what you say is true, General Vextar said carefully, how could you possibly help where our physicians have failed? Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying the Empress's pale form. Human blood has properties that most species consider primitive. No synthetic enhancement, no genetic modification, just raw biological compatibility protocols that evolved over millions of years. He looked directly at Vextar. Sometimes the old ways work when the new ones fail. You're suggesting a direct transfusion? Morden's voice rose in disbelief. The biological incompatibility alone would cause massive system rejection. You would kill her in minutes. Maybe, Marcus admitted. But she's dying anyway, isn't she? He began removing equipment from a small medical kit. I've done this procedure twice before. Both patients survived. The room fell silent except for the steady beeping of the Empress's life support systems. Each breath seemed more labored than the last, and the monitors showed her vital signs continuing their steady decline toward zero. General Vextar found himself at an impossible crossroads. Trust in the Empire's advanced medical science, which had already admitted defeat, or place their hopes in a scarred human with primitive equipment and an impossible claim. The Empress's breathing hitched and several alarms began sounding softly. Time was running out. General Vextar made his decision in the space between heartbeats. Do it, he commanded, his voice cutting through the protests of the royal physicians. You have my authorization. Marcus nodded grimly and began setting up his equipment with practiced efficiency. His movements were precise despite the primitive nature of his tools compared to the advanced Zephyrian technology surrounding them. I need everyone to step back except for one assistant. This requires complete sterile conditions. I'll assist, volunteered Dr. Lyranis, the youngest of the royal physicians. Unlike her colleagues, she watched the humans' preparations with curiosity, rather than disgust. What do you need me to do? Monitor her vitals and be ready to inject epinephrine if her heart stops, Marcus replied, rolling up his left sleeve to reveal a network of old scars along his forearm. This procedure is going to shock her system, hard. Mordan stepped forward angrily. General, I must protest. This human is about to commit murder in front of witnesses. When the Council of Lords learns that we allowed, the Council of Lords can court-martial me later, Vextar interrupted. Right now, this is our only option. Marcus had finished his preparations. The transfusion equipment looked almost comically simple next to the sophisticated alien medical devices. 2 clear tubes connected to a small pump, with monitoring sensors that seemed basic compared to Zephyrian technology. Yet something in the human's confidence suggested this primitive setup had been tested under fire. Before we begin, Marcus said, looking directly at the Empress's unconscious form, I need to explain what's going to happen. The poison in her system is designed to break down Zephyrian cellular structures by targeting specific genetic markers. Human blood lacks those markers entirely. That's precisely why this won't work, Morden muttered. No, that's exactly why it will work, Marcus corrected. My blood will act as a buffer, diluting the poison concentration while providing temporary immune support. Think of it as biological scaffolding, giving her body time to fight back. He inserted the first needle into his own arm, wincing slightly as dark red blood began flowing through the tubing. The tricky part is the compatibility issue. Human blood will trigger her immune system, but not immediately. We'll have maybe 30 minutes before rejection becomes critical. Dr. Lyranis watched the monitors carefully as Marcus inserted the second needle into the Empress's arm. Her white cell count is almost 0. Even if this works, she has no immune system left to fight with. She doesn't need to fight, Marcus explained, adjusting the flow rate on his primitive pump. She just needs to survive long enough for the antidote to take effect. Antidote? Vextar stepped closer. You have an antidote? Marcus managed a weak smile as his blood continued flowing into the dying Empress. Not exactly. But human blood contains natural compounds that neutralize certain types of synthetic poisons. It's not a cure, but it might buy us time to synthesize something more targeted. The first signs came within minutes. The Empress's breathing became less labored, and some color returned to her silver skin. The monitors showed subtle improvements in brain activity and organ function. Around the room, the assembled physicians watched in stunned silence as vital signs that had been declining for weeks suddenly began to stabilize. "Impossible," whispered Mordan. "The readings must be wrong." "They're not wrong," Dr. Lyranis said, checking and rechecking her instruments. "Her cellular regeneration rate is increasing. Whatever's in human blood, it's actually working." Marcus was growing pale as the transfusion continued, but his eyes remained focused on the Empress's monitors. "How long has she been poisoned?" he asked. 3 weeks, Vextar replied. The symptoms appeared gradually at first, then accelerated rapidly. "Then we're cutting this close. The poison has had time to embed itself in her major organs. Even with the blood buffer, we need to synthesize a targeted antidote within the next few hours, or the damage will be irreversible." Dr. Lyranis was already moving toward the laboratory stations. "If you can provide blood samples for analysis, we might be able to identify the active compounds. Our synthesis chambers could potentially replicate them." "There's something else," Marcus said, his voice growing weaker as the transfusion continued. "The Liberation Front didn't create this poison themselves. The biological complexity suggests advanced laboratory work, probably funded by one of the major galactic powers." General Vextar felt ice forming in his stomach. If a major power was behind these assassinations, then the Zephyrian Empire was facing something far more dangerous than terrorist attacks. "This could be the opening move in a galactic war. Can you prove that?" he asked. Marcus nodded toward his equipment pack. "I've been tracking this poison across multiple star systems for the past 8 months. The Altarians weren't the first victims. They've been testing it on smaller populations, refining the formula. I have data on at least 6 other attacks. The implications were staggering. A coordinated campaign of biological warfare spanning months and targeting multiple species. Yet somehow this lone human had been tracking the pattern that all galactic intelligence agencies had missed. "Why?" Vextar asked. "Why are you helping us? Humans have no love for the Zephyrian Empire." Marcus was silent for a moment, watching his blood flow into the Empress's veins. "Because I've seen what this poison does to families, to children, to entire worlds." His scarred face hardened. "And because someone needs to stop these bastards before they perfect their formula." The Empress stirred for the first time in days, her eyelids fluttering as consciousness began to return. Around the medical bay, monitoring equipment registered the strongest vital signs they had recorded since the onset of her illness. Against all logic and scientific understanding, the primitive human procedure was working, but Marcus was weakening rapidly. The amount of blood required for the transfusion was taking its toll on his already battle-worn body. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he struggled to remain conscious. "That's enough," Dr. Lyranis said firmly. "You've given almost a liter. Any more will be dangerous for you." "Not yet," Marcus gasped. "She needs more time. The poison is still active in her system." "You'll kill yourself," she protested. "Better me than her," he replied quietly. "The Empire needs its Empress. The galaxy can spare one worn-out medic." General Vextar found himself facing another impossible decision, watching as the human slowly sacrificed his life to save their ruler. In the space of an hour, every assumption about human nature and capability had been shattered by this scarred stranger's selfless determination. "Stop the transfusion," General Vextar ordered, his command voice cutting through the medical bay's tense atmosphere. "I won't have this human die on my watch." Marcus tried to protest, but his weakened state made arguing difficult. Dr. Lyranis quickly clamped the transfusion lines and began administering emergency fluids to counteract his blood loss. Around them, the Empress's vital signs continued to improve steadily, her breathing now strong and regular. "General," she whispered, her voice barely audible but clear. "What happened?" Vextar approached the medical platform, relief flooding through him as he saw awareness returning to her eyes. "You were poisoned, Your Majesty. This human saved your life." The Empress turned her head slightly to look at Marcus, who was now sitting weakly in a nearby chair while Dr. Lyranis tended to him. "Human, I don't understand." "Neither do I completely," Vextar admitted. "But his blood somehow neutralized the poison that was killing you." As word spread through the Imperial Palace that the Empress was conscious and recovering, The medical bay filled with officials and advisors. The sight of a pale human medic surrounded by advanced alien medical equipment became the subject of intense curiosity and debate. Marcus gradually regained his strength over the next few hours, aided by Zephyrian medical technology that accelerated his recovery, far beyond what human medicine could achieve. As he recovered, he shared his knowledge with Dr. Loranes and the other physicians, teaching them about the specific properties of human blood that had made the transfusion successful. "It's not magic," he explained to the assembled medical team. "Human blood evolved on a world with massive biodiversity and constant viral challenges. We developed broad-spectrum immune responses that most other species refined away in favor of targeted defenses." Dr. Loranes nodded thoughtfully. "So when faced with an artificial poison designed to exploit Zephyrian genetic markers, your primitive immune system provided protection we couldn't achieve with our advanced medicine." Exactly. Sometimes evolution's trial and error approach creates solutions that pure logic misses. Meanwhile, intelligence analysts were poring over the data Marcus had collected during his 8-month investigation. The pattern that emerged was deeply disturbing. The Liberation Front was indeed a cover organization, funded and directed by the hegemony of Vorth, a militant alliance of species that viewed the expanding Zephyrian Empire as a threat to their own territorial ambitions. "They're not just targeting royalty," Admiral Kestan reported to the emergency council session. "The attacks are designed to destabilize our government structure, while testing biological weapons for larger conflicts." Empress Zarathes, though still weak from her ordeal, insisted on attending the briefing via holographic link from her medical bed. Her silver skin had regained most of its natural luster, though she remained connected to monitoring equipment as a precaution. "How many other species have been targeted?" she asked. Marcus, who had been granted temporary advisor status despite his human origins, consulted his datapad. "Confirmed attacks on 17 different worlds across 9 star systems. The Altarian massacre was just the most visible. Most of the other attacks were disguised as natural disease outbreaks. The scope of the conspiracy sent shockwaves through the assembled leadership. What they had assumed was isolated terrorism was actually coordinated biological warfare on an unprecedented scale." "What's their endgame?" asked Foreign Minister Dalvak. "Chaos," Marcus replied simply. "Destabilize enough governments simultaneously, and the resulting power vacuum lets them expand their territory unopposed." The Empress studied the human carefully. Despite her recent brush with death, her mind was sharp and focused. "You've been hunting them alone for 8 months. Why didn't you contact any galactic authorities?" Marcus's expression darkened. "Because I tried that after the 4th attack. The Galactic Health Organization buried my reports, claiming insufficient evidence. The Interspecies Security Council wouldn't even grant me a hearing." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Human testimony isn't considered reliable by most galactic institutions." The admission hung in the air like an accusation. The Zephyrian Empire, like most advanced civilizations, had always viewed humans as primitive newcomers to galactic society. The idea that their prejudice had allowed a massive conspiracy to continue unchecked was deeply uncomfortable. "That changes now," the Empress declared firmly. "Dr. Chen, I'm offering you a position as special medical advisor to the Imperial Court. Full security clearance, unlimited research access, and a mandate to continue your investigation with our full support." The offer stunned everyone present, including Marcus himself. Humans were rarely granted access to high-level Imperial positions, let alone ones involving sensitive security matters. "Your Majesty," Mordan protested, "surely such a position should go to someone with proper credentials and experience in galactic affairs." "Dr. Chen has credentials where it matters," she replied, her voice carrying the authority of absolute rule. "He succeeded where our entire medical establishment failed. He tracked a conspiracy that our intelligence services missed completely. I'd say his experience is exactly what we need." Marcus considered the offer carefully. Accepting would mean abandoning his independent status and tying himself to a galactic power that many humans viewed with suspicion. But it would also give him resources to continue his work on a scale he could never achieve alone. "I accept, Your Majesty, with one condition." The Empress raised an eyebrow. "You're hardly in a position to make demands, Doctor. I want permission to contact Earth and share our findings with human medical researchers. If we're going to stop this conspiracy, we'll need all the biological expertise we can get." Human medicine might be primitive, but we understand biological warfare better than most species want to admit. The request sparked immediate debate among the advisors. Involving Earth directly in imperial affairs was unprecedented and potentially dangerous. Humans had a reputation for military aggression that made many galactic civilizations nervous. But the Empress had seen firsthand what human determination could accomplish. Granted, contact your people and tell them everything. If the hegemony of Vorth wants to play games with biological weapons, they're about to learn what happens when you threaten someone under human protection. General Vextar smiled grimly at the declaration. He had fought alongside humans before and knew they had a talent for making their enemies regret starting fights. The Liberation Front had awakened something they didn't understand when they tried to assassinate the Empress. As the council session concluded and officials dispersed to their various duties, Marcus remained behind to speak privately with the Empress. Despite her recovery, she looked tired, and he could see the weight of recent events in her eyes. Your Majesty, there's something else you should know. The poison they used on you wasn't their final version. The data I collected suggests they're developing something much more powerful, something that could potentially target multiple species simultaneously. The Empress absorbed this information with the calm of a seasoned ruler, though Marcus could see the concern in her expression. How much time do we have? Based on their testing schedule, maybe 6 months before they're ready for large-scale deployment. Less if they accelerate the timeline after today's failure. Then we'd better get to work. 3 weeks later, the Imperial Research Complex buzzed with unprecedented activity. Scientists from across the Empire worked alongside human researchers who had arrived aboard the first official Earth delegation to the Zephyrian homeworld. The collaboration was rocky at first, with significant cultural and scientific differences creating tension between the teams. Dr. Sarah Kim, Earth's leading biochemical warfare expert, stood beside Marcus in the main laboratory, studying readouts that would have been incomprehensible to most humans. The Zephyrian translation systems made communication possible, but the advanced alien technology required constant explanation. "This is incredible," she muttered, reviewing the analysis of the assassination poison. "They've essentially created a species-specific bioweapon that targets genetic markers at the cellular level. The precision required for this is beyond anything Earth has developed." Marcus nodded grimly. "And according to our intelligence, this was just a prototype. The hegemony of Vorth has been refining it across multiple test subjects for almost a year." Dr. Leyranus approached with the latest synthesis results. Over the past weeks, she had become the primary liaison between human and Zephyrian medical teams, her curiosity about human biology driving rapid advances in cross-species medicine. "We've successfully replicated the antidote compounds found in human blood," she reported, "but we're still missing something. The synthetic version is only 60% effective compared to the original transfusion. That's because you're only copying the obvious components," Dr. Kim explained. "Human blood contains thousands of trace compounds that evolved over millions of years. Some of them are so subtle that we don't even understand their functions yet." The challenge had become the central focus of their research. While they could now treat the current poison with synthetic compounds, the hegemony would inevitably develop new versions designed to overcome their countermeasures. They needed a more comprehensive solution. "What if we approached this differently?" Marcus suggested. "Instead of trying to replicate human blood chemistry, what if we found a way to temporarily modify Zephyrian immune systems to respond like human ones?" The suggestion sparked intense debate among the assembled scientists. Modifying immune systems was considered extremely dangerous by most galactic medical standards, with good reason. Too many experiments had resulted in autoimmune disasters or complete system failures, but Dr. Leyranus saw the potential. A temporary genetic therapy targeting immune response patterns. If we could trigger broader spectrum defenses for a limited time, it would require extensive testing, Dr. Kim warned, and the side effects could be severe. "The side effects of doing nothing will be worse," Marcus replied. "If the hegemony succeeds in perfecting their bioweapons, we're looking at potential genocide on a galactic scale." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from General Vextar. "Dr. Chen, report to the command center immediately. We have a situation." Marcus arrived to find the command center in chaos. Intelligence reports were flooding in from across the Empire, painting a picture of coordinated attacks beginning across multiple systems. The hegemony of Vorth had apparently decided that subtlety was no longer necessary. "They're moving faster than we anticipated," Admiral Kestan reported grimly. "Biological attacks on 7 worlds in the past 12 hours. No survivors on 3 of them." The tactical displays showed the scope of the assault. The hegemony had clearly been preparing for this moment, with military forces positioned to take advantage of the chaos created by their bioweapons. It was biological warfare on an unprecedented scale. "What about the affected populations?" Marcus asked. "Mixed results. Species with similar physiology to Zephyrians are suffering massive casualties, but some populations are showing unexpected resistance." Marcus studied the data patterns, recognizing something familiar. Which species are showing resistance? Mostly younger civilizations with less refined medical technology. The Terran colonies, Rigelian settlements, some of the frontier worlds. Species with primitive immune systems, Marcus realized. Like humans. The implication was staggering. The hegemony's sophisticated bioweapons were most effective against the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, while primitive species with broad-spectrum immune responses showed natural resistance. "Get me a direct line to Earth," Marcus commanded. "We need to contact every human colony and frontier settlement in the galaxy. They might be our best hope for developing resistance." As communications specialists worked to establish connections across the vast distances involved, Marcus coordinated with the research teams. The pattern they were seeing matched his theory about evolutionary immune responses. Species that had refined their defenses were vulnerable to precisely targeted attacks, while those that maintained primitive but broad defenses were naturally protected. "It's like vaccines," Dr. Kim explained to the assembled command staff. "Over-specific immunities create vulnerabilities that broad-spectrum responses can handle." Empress Zarathes, now fully recovered but still showing the stress of recent events, joined the emergency planning session. "What are you proposing, Dr. Chen?" "A coordinated response using human medical teams as the backbone. We establish treatment centers at major population hubs, using human blood products and modified immune therapy to create resistance in vulnerable populations. That would require thousands of human volunteers," General Vexistar pointed out. "People willing to travel to war zones and risk their lives for alien populations." Marcus smiled grimly. "General, you clearly don't know humans very well. When someone threatens innocent people, we tend to show up in large numbers." His prediction proved accurate. Within hours of Earth receiving the emergency communication, volunteer medical teams began organizing across human space. Military transports were requisitioned, medical supplies gathered, and experienced combat medics prepared for deployment across the galaxy. The response surprised even the Empress, who had begun to understand human nature during Marcus's recovery period. Why would they risk themselves for species they've barely had contact with? "Because that's what humans do," Marcus explained simply. "We're not the smartest or strongest species in the galaxy, but we're probably the most stubborn when it comes to fighting bullies." The first human medical teams began arriving at affected worlds within 48 hours, establishing field hospitals and treatment centers with remarkable efficiency. Their primitive equipment looked out of place alongside advanced alien medical technology, but the results spoke for themselves. On Kepler 7, where the local population was suffering 90% casualties from the bioweapon, human medics managed to establish treatment protocols that reduced mortality to less than 20%. Similar successes occurred across multiple worlds as human teams adapted their techniques to different alien physiologies. But the hegemony was watching these successes with growing concern. Intelligence reports indicated they were accelerating their weapon development, trying to create bioweapons that could target human immune responses as well. "They're adapting," Admiral Kestan warned during the daily briefing. "Intercepted communications suggest they're analyzing human blood samples captured from our medical teams." Marcus felt ice in his stomach. If the hegemony succeeded in creating weapons that could target human immune systems, they would lose their only reliable defense against the biological warfare campaign. "How long do we have?" the Empress asked. "Best estimate? 2 weeks before they can field test an anti-human variant. Maybe a month before wide deployment." The Empress stood quietly for a moment, studying the tactical displays that showed both the scope of the crisis and the heroic efforts of human medical teams across the galaxy. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute determination. "Then we don't wait for them to perfect their weapons. We take the fight to them directly." The joint human-Zephyrian task force assembled at the edge of hegemony space was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Sleek Imperial warships flew alongside hastily converted human medical vessels, their crews united by a shared determination to end the biological warfare campaign before it could claim more innocent lives. Marcus stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching the tactical display as intelligence teams finalized their target selection. The hegemony's primary research facility was located on Vorth Prime, heavily defended and surrounded by the most advanced military technology their alliance could provide. "Are you certain about this approach?" General Vextar asked, reviewing the mission parameters for the 10th time. "A direct assault on their homeworld is an act of war. They started the war when they tried to assassinate the Empress," Marcus replied firmly. "We're just finishing it." The plan was audacious in its simplicity. While Zephyrian forces engaged the hegemony's military defenses, human medical teams would infiltrate the research facility to gather intelligence and destroy the bioweapon production capabilities. It relied heavily on human expertise in biological warfare and their proven ability to operate in hostile environments. Empress Zarathes had insisted on accompanying the mission personally. Despite the protests of her advisors, she stood beside Marcus on the bridge, her presence serving as both inspiration and reminder of what they were fighting to protect. "Dr. Chen," she said quietly, "I want you to know that regardless of what happens today, your people have already proven themselves to be invaluable allies. The galaxy owes humanity a debt that can never be fully repaid." "We're not doing this for debts or politics," Marcus replied. "We're doing it because it's right." The assault began at dawn on Vorth Prime, with Zephyrian warships engaging the orbital defenses, while human stealth transports slipped through the chaos toward the surface. Marcus led the primary infiltration team, his experience with biological warfare making him the obvious choice despite his recent medical ordeal. The hegemony's research facility was a sprawling complex built into a mountainside, its laboratories protected by multiple layers of security and defensive systems. As the team approached, they could see the signs of frantic activity within scientists and technicians, working desperately to complete their projects. Before the Allied forces could stop them, "Movement on Sublevel 7, reported Sergeant Rodriguez, the team's military specialist. "Looks like they're trying to evacuate research data." "Not if we can help it," Marcus muttered, leading his team toward the facility's ventilation systems. Human anatomical advantages, smaller stature and greater flexibility compared to most galactic species, made infiltration easier than it would have been for Zephyrian commandos. Inside the facility, they found horrors that exceeded even their worst expectations. Laboratory after laboratory filled with test subjects from dozens of species, all in various stages of biological experimentation. The hegemony hadn't just been developing weapons. They had been conducting systematic research into the vulnerabilities of every major galactic civilization. "Jesus," whispered Dr. Sarah Kim, who had insisted on joining the infiltration despite Marcus's protests. "They've been at this for years." The scope of the research was staggering. Detailed genetic profiles, immune system analyses, and biological vulnerability assessments for hundreds of species. The assassination attempts had just been field tests for a much larger program of biological warfare. "Download everything," Marcus ordered, connecting human data storage devices to the alien computer systems. "We need to know exactly what they were planning." As they worked, alarms began sounding throughout the facility. The hegemony's security forces had apparently detected their presence and were mobilizing to stop them. The sound of weapons fire echoed through the corridors as Zephyrian assault teams engaged the defenders above ground. "We've got company," Sergeant Rodriguez reported, monitoring the security feeds. Armed response teams moving fast. Marcus made a quick decision. "Sarah, take the research data and get out. I'm going to the primary laboratory to destroy their production capabilities." "Marcus, no," Dr. Kim protested. "We should stick together. Someone needs to make sure this information reaches the Empress. Go." "That's an order." Reluctantly, Dr. Kim and half the team began fighting their way toward the extraction point, while Marcus led the remainder deeper into the facility. The primary laboratory was located at the facility's heart, protected by the most advanced security systems the hegemony could devise. What they found inside defied comprehension. Massive biological synthesis chambers filled with cultures of the assassination poison, ready for mass production. Computer systems showing distribution plans that would have affected every major population center in the galaxy. The hegemony hadn't just been planning targeted assassinations, they had been preparing for biological genocide. "Set the charges," Marcus ordered, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "We burn it all." As his team placed explosive devices throughout the laboratory, Marcus discovered the most disturbing revelation of all. In a secured section of the facility, they found research into human immune responses, detailed analyses of his own blood samples, taken during the medical treatments after the transfusion. The hegemony had been studying him personally, trying to understand why human biology had proven so effective against their weapons. Worse, they were close to developing countermeasures that would neutralize human immunity entirely. They were going to target Earth directly, he realized with growing horror, not just human colonies, Earth itself. The implications were staggering. If the hegemony had succeeded in perfecting anti-human bioweapons, they could have eliminated the galaxy's only natural resistance to their biological warfare campaign. Every species would have been defenseless, charges set, Sergeant Rodriguez reported. "We need to move. Security forces are closing in." As they fought their way toward the extraction point, Marcus couldn't shake the images he had seen in the laboratory. The systematic planning, the cold calculation, the complete disregard for life on a galactic scale. The hegemony of Vorth had revealed themselves to be something far worse than political opponents. They were genocidal monsters. The extraction was chaotic, with Zephyrian assault shuttles fighting through defensive fire to reach the human infiltration teams. Marcus's group made it to the pickup point just as the demolition charges detonated, sending massive explosions rippling through the research facility. From orbit, they watched as the mountain complex collapsed in on itself, taking with it years of biological warfare research and production capabilities. But Marcus knew this was only the beginning. The hegemony had other facilities, other research programs, and now they knew that humans posed a direct threat to their plans. "Mission accomplished," General Vextar reported as the task force began withdrawing from hegemony space. "The facility is destroyed and we've captured extensive intelligence data." "It's not over," Marcus warned, studying the downloaded files. "This was just one facility. They have backup locations and now they know we're coming for them." Empress Zarathus reviewed the intelligence data with growing alarm. The scope of the hegemony's plans was far beyond anything they had imagined. This wasn't just about territorial expansion, it was about reshaping the galactic order through systematic elimination of opposing civilizations. "We need to share this information with every species in the galaxy," she declared. "The hegemony has threatened all of us. It's time for a unified response." Marcus nodded, but his thoughts were already turning to the longer-term implications. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most primitive species could provide solutions that advanced technology missed entirely. Human medicine, human determination, and human refusal to accept defeat had already changed the course of galactic history. But the war was far from over, and the hegemony of Vorth was about to discover what happened when you threatened a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history refusing to give up, no matter how impossible the odds. 6 months later, the Galactic Assembly convened for the first time in its history, with human representatives holding full voting status. The chamber that had once echoed with dismissive comments about primitive human civilization now listened intently as Dr. Marcus Chen presented his final report on the biological warfare crisis. The hegemony of Vorth's network extended far beyond what we initially discovered, he told the assembled delegates. 43 research facilities across 17 star systems, all working toward the systematic elimination of galactic civilization as we know it. The destruction of those facilities had been a coordinated effort involving dozens of species, united by the shared threat to their existence. Human medical teams had led the biological containment efforts, while Zephyrian military forces provided the backbone for the assault operations. It was the first truly cooperative military action in galactic history. The final casualty count stands at 2.3 million beings across affected worlds, Marcus continued, his voice heavy with the weight of those losses. But it could have been billions if the hegemony had succeeded in their ultimate plan. In the months following the destruction of the primary research facility, The Allied forces had uncovered the true scope of the conspiracy. The hegemony hadn't just been developing species-specific bioweapons. They had been planning coordinated attacks designed to collapse galactic civilization entirely, leaving them as the dominant power among the survivors. Empress Zarathes, now serving as the elected leader of the new Galactic Defense Alliance, stood to address the assembly. Her recovery from the assassination attempt had become a symbol of resistance against the hegemony's biological warfare, and her leadership had been crucial in maintaining unity during the crisis. "We have learned valuable lessons from this conflict," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. "The most important being that technological advancement means nothing without wisdom, and that sometimes the oldest solutions are the most effective." The Empress's words carried special significance, given the role human medicine had played in the crisis. The primitive blood transfusion that had saved her life had led to breakthroughs in treating biological warfare that the galaxy's most advanced medical researchers had missed entirely. Dr. Lyranis, now serving as the director of the new Interspecies Medical Research Institute, presented the scientific conclusions that had emerged from the crisis. Human immune system responses have provided the foundation for broad-spectrum defenses against biological warfare. We've successfully adapted these principles to protect 17 different species. The research had revealed fundamental flaws in how galactic civilization approached medical science. In their pursuit of perfect targeted treatments, most species had abandoned the broad-spectrum defenses that evolution had originally provided. Humans, being relative newcomers to advanced technology, had retained those primitive but effective systems. "The irony," Dr. Lyranis continued, "is that our medical advancement had made us more vulnerable than our ancestors. Sometimes progress requires taking steps backward to move forward." The new medical protocols developed from human research were being implemented across the galaxy. Blood banks using human donors, modified immune therapies based on human responses, and emergency treatment procedures that combined primitive techniques with advanced technology. It was a fusion of old and new that no one had thought possible before the crisis. Marcus watched the proceedings with mixed emotions. The recognition of human contributions to galactic civilization was gratifying, but it had come at an enormous cost in lives and suffering. The scars from the biological warfare attacks would take years to heal, and some worlds might never fully recover. "Dr. Chen," called out the Altarian delegate, interrupting his thoughts, "what is your assessment of future biological warfare threats?" Marcus considered his response carefully. The hegemony of Vorth has been defeated, but their research was based on sound scientific principles. Other hostile powers could attempt similar attacks. We need permanent early warning systems and rapid response capabilities. This was the reason for the new Galactic Defense Alliance. The crisis had proven that biological warfare posed an existential threat that required coordinated response. No single species or empire could defend against such attacks alone. The Alliance's Medical Response Corps will maintain rapid deployment teams on every major world, announced Admiral Keston, now serving as the Alliance's military coordinator, with human medical specialists as the core teams, supported by the best medical technology each member species can provide. It was a remarkable transformation. Humans, who had been considered barely civilized primitives just a year ago, were now recognized as essential partners in galactic defense. Their medical expertise, combined with their natural resistance to biological warfare, made them invaluable allies. But perhaps more importantly, the crisis had revealed something about human character that impressed even their former critics: the willingness to risk their lives for alien populations they had barely met, the stubborn refusal to accept defeat even when facing impossible odds, and the creative problem-solving that found solutions where advanced science had failed. "There's something else we need to discuss," Marcus said, standing to address a topic that had been weighing on his mind. The hegemony's research wasn't entirely destructive. They made significant advances in understanding genetic manipulation and immune system modification. That knowledge could be used for healing instead of harm. The suggestion sparked intense debate among the delegates. The same research techniques that had been used to create targeted bioweapons could potentially cure genetic diseases and extend lifespans across the galaxy, but using research obtained through such horrific methods raised serious ethical questions. "We have a choice," Marcus continued. We can destroy all traces of that research as a monument to our moral superiority, or we can use it to heal the damage that was done and prevent future suffering. Empress Zarathes saw the wisdom in his proposal. Dr. Chen is right. We honor the victims not by ignoring the knowledge gained from their sacrifice, but by ensuring it's used to save lives instead of taking them. The debate continued for hours, but eventually the assembly reached consensus. The captured hegemony research would be studied and adapted for medical applications, under strict oversight from the new Interspecies Medical Ethics Committee. It was a decision that reflected the galaxy's determination to find positive outcomes even from the darkest chapters of their history. As the formal sessions concluded and delegates began dispersing back to their home worlds, Marcus found himself alone with the Empress in the Assembly Hall's observation deck. The view showed Earth in the distance, its blue surface marking humanity's entry into the larger galactic community. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't responded to our distress call?" she asked quietly. Marcus considered the question. "Sometimes. But that's not how humans are built. When someone needs help, we show up. It's not always smart and it doesn't always work out, but we can't seem to help ourselves. The galaxy is better for it," she replied. "Your people have taught us something important about the value of persistence and the power of refusing to accept defeat." "We've learned things too," Marcus admitted. "Mostly that the universe is a lot bigger and more complicated than we thought. But also that intelligence and technology aren't the only things that matter. Sometimes heart and stubbornness are just as important." The Empress smiled, a gesture that had become more frequent since her recovery. "Perhaps that's the real lesson from all of this. That diversity of approach, biological, technological, and philosophical, makes all of us stronger." As they watched Earth turning slowly in space, Marcus reflected on how much had changed since that desperate night when he had first offered his blood to save an alien Empress. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the most primitive solutions were the most effective, that cooperation could overcome any threat, and that courage and compassion were the most advanced technologies of all. The war against the hegemony of Vorth was over, but the peace they had built together was just beginning, and for the first time since leaving Earth, Marcus felt genuinely hopeful about humanity's place in the larger universe, not as conquerors or subjects, but as partners in building something better than any species could achieve alone. The battle-scarred human medic and the alien Empress stood together, watching their worlds turn in space, knowing that they had helped forge an alliance that would protect both their peoples for generations to come. It had begun with blood and desperation, but it had become something far greater, a proof that even in the vast darkness of space, hope and heroism could still light the way forward.